Welcome to Inside Auto Podcast, where we feature everyone and anyone you'd want to talk to in and out of the automotive industry.
Ilana Shabtai here, host of Inside Auto Podcast, where we interview top dealers, GMs, marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in and out of the automotive industry. And before we introduce today's guest, this episode is sponsored by AutoLeadStar.com. The AutoLeadStar platform is built on a technology so powerful it allows you to market, sell, and service cars as you would in the real world, online and at scale, making one-to-one matches between shoppers and inventory. AutoLeadStar is the only platform that is powered by scale, speed, and specificity to change the way dealers do marketing. So today we're going to do things a bit differently. In addition to having our guest, who I'll introduce shortly, we have Josh Sachs, who's our SDR team lead at AutoLeadStar. He'll be co-hosting the conversation with me. It's his first time on Inside Auto Podcast, so warm welcome. Hey Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, excited to be here.
Yes, we are excited to have you. And we're even more excited to have today's guest, who's really making an impact in automotive. We're welcoming George Nenni to the podcast. George, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Quick, impressive intro before we get into the conversation. George is the founder and principal consultant at Generations Digital, an automotive digital marketing consulting firm that empowers car dealers to eliminate ad waste and maximize their marketing dollars. We like to hear that. He is the author of A Car Dealer's Guide to Digital Marketing and A Car Dealer's Guide to Google My Business, as well as the creator of the GMBspy Chrome extension. For nearly 3 decades, George has been a leading educator on emerging technology in retail automotive, and he is a highly sought after industry speaker and has been published extensively in industry journals. So excited to have you here. What an impressive bio. How's it going? I know you brought your books today, so we're excited to talk about them. But
Sure.
Before we get into that, let's talk about how you actually got into automotive. We love to talk about this with all of our guests because everyone has such an interesting path into automotive. So tell us a little bit about yours.
Sure. I started in 1993. Two of my older brothers, I'm the youngest of seven children. Two of my older brothers started a business called Dealer Specialties in 1989. People are familiar with that business. They still, I think, the industry leader in on-site servicing for photography and data collection and data distribution. But, they started that business as a startup while they're working their normal jobs. I started as the first employee in 93. We really covered the country with franchisees and grew that business tremendously in the 90s. And then they sold it to Trader Publishing, and they both retired. I stayed on with Trader. Trader became Dominion over the years, but made a lot of acquisitions in websites, digital marketing, CRM, DMS. I was fortunate enough to run operations for CRM and digital marketing, and also run the entire dealer specialty organization until August of 2017, when I left to start what I thought was going to be a digital agency, but I was kept out of certain businesses for a period of time. So I said, hey, look, I'll just consult and see what comes of it. And really just the business kind of developed on its own, really just based on needs we saw out there in the market.
And where in all of that did you write your books?
Well, most of what we've done, I think, is sort of stumble into opportunities. And so we wrote the books along the way based on either collections of articles we had put together or training we had put together, and dealers would say, can you kind of consolidate that? And as we started doing that, we realized that publishing books was the easiest way to distribute that. So our Google My Business book, for instance, we had written dozens of articles on how-tos, how to set up your categories, or how to claim your listing, or how to remove duplicate listings. And it was Christmas break 2019, and the dealers said, hey, can you kind of put those all together in a binder? And so my oldest son Will is a really good writer, and he got together with me, and we just started collecting all the articles. And as we put it together, I said, well, this all kind of looks like a book. And so we went back to the drawing board and built an outline, and then kind of constructed it that way. But we've really just kind of listened to the dealers and see what educational needs they have.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned something in that, the setting up categories. Let's talk about that, because that is a very practical tip for dealers to take away that they're just not doing correctly these days. And they can get so much more traction if they're setting up their Google My Business with the correct categories. And, I learned that actually from a recent interview that I heard from you. So I can't take credit, but I want you to expand on that so that our dealers and our listeners can walk away and fix that.
Yeah, they do. I had no idea the categories had quite the impact they did. But yeah, categories, restaurants are the easiest ones to kind of search for and kind of field test this. But, vegan restaurant, vegetarian restaurant, for instance, those are, I'm neither one, but those are two categories that not very many restaurants choose. And so if you search for vegetarian or vegan restaurant, you only find the ones that have those categories chosen. And if a restaurant adds it tomorrow, they show up tomorrow. So it's pretty amazing how instant the categories work. And so that was also, another thing we stumbled into was this GMBspy extension. I read an article in January of 2020, I think by Darren Shaw up at Whitespark, saying that he had discovered that in the HTML, you could see your competitors' categories. And so I dug in, and you do a right click, and then you look at the source HTML, and then you do a control F and look for the second tilde, and then a few characters later, you'll see the first, and I thought, what a great find, but what a horrible experience to try to do that at scale. And so we just hired a developer and wrote the Chrome extension. Again, we thought categories were interesting and important, but not nearly as important as the SEO community, because that tool just got really embraced. And today I think we're approaching 8,000 weekly users. 60% are outside the US. But categories are a big deal, and dealers should not only set theirs, but if they're losing in local search, they should find out what their competitors' categories are.
So that Chrome extension is not just for automotive, it's for anyone. You could just go in, click, see what categories your competitors are using, and basically build your entire strategy based off of that.
Sure. Yep. You could just make those changes, and then, and you want to do other things as well. On Google My Business, categories are important, but if you're a 3.7 stars with 10 ratings, you're not going to show up no matter how good your categories are. So you've got to have high ratings, you've got to have lots of ratings, and you've got to have positive sentiment in those ratings.
Yeah.
Not only keywords, searchable keywords, but also best, we love, just things that Google's going to kind of amplify.
And go ahead, Josh.
No, you also, George, you talk a lot about ownership, right? You talk about, owning a dealership, owning its Google Analytics, it's Google My Business. How important do you, I see it a lot of your posts, I heard it on the podcast recently. How important do you feel ownership is for the dealership, taking it back into their hands and them being in charge, as opposed to the vendor, as opposed to anyone else outside?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The dealer not only needs to own their Google My Business, their Google Analytics, all of those accounts, and they need to keep the passwords, I think, with a generic email address. So not, Joe at nennichevrolet.com, but instead, maybe a generic email address that the dealer has the logins to, and share those around with other trusted sources. But you just don't want to lose. Imagine losing the last 5 years of your P&L, your income statement for a dealership would be really hard to run the business. And so losing all that history of Google Analytics would not be desirable.
When you talk about the category, I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on this categories thing because I just can't believe that dealers aren't doing it correctly. But when you talk about the categories, what would you suggest? Let's say you said Nenni, a Chevrolet dealership in a city. What would the categories? What would that structure look like for a dealership like that?
First, yeah, great question. So first, strategically, you decide that you needed to break your single store listing, your Google My Business listing, into at least two, maybe three or four. So in addition to your sales listing, you got to have a service listing. If you don't create a parts listing, that's okay. Or if you have parts and service combined, I think Body Shop is a great place. You can win a lot of non-branded category search through having a listing. And so strategically, I think laying it out there and saying, okay, what are my biggest profit centers for my dealership, and where do I want to set up those GMBs? Then once you set those up, you only have 10 categories for each. And for fixed operations, there's probably 15 categories at least. For sales, there might only be 3 or 4, or for a Stellantis dealer, it might be a few more than that. But for the franchise side of the house, you want to choose your franchise locations first, followed by car dealer, followed by used car dealer. And I think that's about it. That's about the only ones. If you're in Europe or something, outside the U.S., car broker, and sometimes I think with Hispanic search, I see car broker pull up a little bit. But those would be the primary. And then for the fixed op side for service, it would be auto repair, and then followed by all the other, brake repair, exhaust repair, tires. You can, and so as you do those, the way to determine if you're winning is my volume of non-branded category search growing or not? And I think you'll find for all of our dealers that we build those out, they absolutely start gaining additional share by having more real estate on Google My Business.
So how do you track that? Or how would you advise dealers to track that?
Yep, in the Insights tab. So if you go in the admin side of Google My Business, you can click on Insights. And Google's been busy working on that the last month or two. So it's a little bit kind of in construction. It's broken in two pieces currently, but I assume it'll consolidate up soon. But they'll show you the number of searches by brand and by franchise brand and by category. And so I can't remember the names of them. I know what I call them. You know, I really refer to them as, you know, like the direct is the brand name. So if it were Nenni Chevrolet, it would be those two terms together. If it were just Chevrolet dealer near me, that would be just what they'll call brand. So really franchise brand. And then the other is discovery, or for me, you know, non-branded category search. And that's really what winning looks like. When you grow that share, you're winning more, you know, tire dealer near me, or, you know, Jeep brakes near me, those sort of searches.
Awesome. Now, another part of what you've been doing, which I love reading about on your LinkedIn, is focusing on the ROI for dealerships. It can get very, very busy, especially if there's multiple vendors. And a lot of times dealers are getting away with, you know, paying twice as much as they should for, let's say, agency expenses. There's obviously a lot of layers to making sure that there's the right ROI and that there's not wasteful marketing dollars out there. The first question I have on that is, what is your opinion or philosophy on the way vendors or agencies, partners should price dealers when it comes to, or charge dealers when it comes to their SEM? I know, you know, there's a lot of talk about, should it be a percentage based of their actual ad spend? Should it be a fixed fee? Are you somewhere in the middle? I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and if you think that contributes at all to wasteful ad dollars.
Yes. So I think I generally would fall in the camp of preferring a flat rate, but you know, it really depends on what your spend is. I think really at the end of the day, it's more, what is your effective rate? So if it's a flat percentage, your effective rate is that percentage. If it's a fixed cost, you're not spending a lot, you know, percentage your spend moves. And so, you know, and you know, honestly, I think agencies probably get beat up a lot in the market. It's a tough business. I managed that for years at Dominion, and the margins are pretty tough, you know. And so generally we're trying to keep that percentage maybe at 20 to 30 or 35%. But, you know, to some degree you can hold your nose if the results are incredible, right? So Facebook's a great example. You know, we see agencies running Facebook campaigns with a spend of maybe $1,200 with maybe $700 or $800 agency spend. And at first glance, you say, "Oh my gosh, that's almost 100% agency fee." Well, you know, no one's going to run $1,200 worth of Facebook ads for a couple $100. So you're going to have to spend to get into that. And if you increase the spend, then your percentage would be lower. But, you know, some of these agencies just really knock it out of the park in terms of conversions from those campaigns. And so now, do I really care what the percentage spend is, or, you know, really what are my results? And so it's kind of a long-winded answer and roundabout, but I think in the end, just have transparency and know what percentage is spend, what percentage is fee, what are the results from those campaigns, and you know, what's my effective rate.
You talk, George, you talk about transparency and conversion as well. I've heard you write about this a bit. So can you talk us through a bit of what you see? I mean, I know a lot of vendors come up with different ideas of conversion, and it ends up being that we're all speaking a different language, right? And I've seen you speak about this
Yes.
often. What do you think dealers need to be looking out for? What's a conversion? How should they be making sure that, you know, it's not smoke and mirrors, it's, you know, a real conversion, tangibly helping them sell a service?
Yeah, it's a great question, Josh. And so I think, you know, we teach dealers to get their antenna up when they hear the word conversion, when they hear the word engagement, you know, those two words. But you're right, especially conversion, you make the agency define it, because you'd just be surprised. And maybe you wouldn't be surprised because you just see it, you know, not all the time, but maybe 10% of the time, especially with a new agency, you'll get in and they'll say conversions, and especially they'll show their paid search and they'll say it's $10 cost per conversion from paid search, to which I immediately know that we've got a definitions problem, because it wouldn't be that low unless you were buying only brand. And so, yeah, so it ends up, you learn that a VDP is a conversion, or a page scroll is a conversion. And so, those soft conversions or those signals are interesting for sure, but you can't call them conversions. What we defined is any time that the dealer's in touch with a consumer, either through a phone call, so a click to call or a DNI phone call. That would include a chat engagement where you may not know their name, right? So, and you may not know their name from the phone call either, but you're engaged. You have the opportunity. Lead forms, of course, are fabulous. Trade-in lead forms, great, especially if you get PII information, and then digital retail and all the other combinations. But so we generally lead forms, chats, click to calls, texts, trade leads, DNI, leads if you're using a provider like that, or DNI phone calls using a provider like that.
Right, that's our philosophy as well. I want to ask you about, you said about a $10 cost per lead for brand. How deep do you go with your dealers? I mean, like, are you looking at new inventory, used inventory? Should dealers be going that deep? And if so, how, if I'm a GM of a store, not a marketing expert, how do I get to that level of deepness that I can understand, a more expensive cost per lead coming from a new inventory thing? How do I manage that? And how do I, tell the difference between what should be a brand, bottom of the bottom of the tree versus a new inventory, used inventory ad that's driving traffic?
Yep. I think from a paid search perspective, the first thing the dealer should do is make sure they understand what the strategy is. And so the question might be, what categories of paid search are we currently playing in, or what's the mission of our paid search? And so in my mind, there's 5. There's dealer name, so Nenni Chevrolet. There's make geo, so Chevrolet dealer near me or Chevrolet dealer Cincinnati. Right. So those 2 are layups in paid search. Almost. If you don't run any paid search at all, you should run those. Then you've got new cars, used cars, and fixed stops. New cars can be difficult. You got to make sure that you really watch those campaigns and you understand which make models. Especially today, we've got dwindling new car inventory, so dealers should really be careful they're not running paid search campaigns for a model they have 1 or 2 of. And then used cars as a category I would not run. I don't find those to be effective on paid search. There's just a lot more cost-effective ways, paid Facebook, marketplace. To market used. And then fixed, I'm probably a bigger fan of email campaigns on fixed than I am of paid search. But if you're running it again, so once the dealer knows those categories, then diving into specific keywords. Okay, so for my brand, how much is my cost per click? How much did I spend last month on my brand? How many conversions came from my branded clicks? That's the kind of digging in. And I think when you really get to that keyword level, what are my top performing keywords? What are my most expensive keywords? What are my lowest performing keywords? As you see those and you get into that granularity, and it doesn't take that long. I mean, that whole exercise could take 5 or 10 minutes with the right agency. Then you really get comfortable to say, okay, I understand what's going on, and I know where my search dollars are going.
I think it would be great if the industry can streamline the way we talk about leads and conversions, because I think and all this other stuff that we're talking about too, but especially if you want to see the impact of a change at the dealership, right? Whether that's you go from one agency to another, you go from one agency to in-house. It's very hard to do pre-post without having that, just like baseline understanding of what a conversion is. And so how can you really know if your leads are going up or down, if they're changing from one agency to the other? The translation and those definitions really need to be streamlined. So I really think if we can get there as an industry, we would have a much, much better, more efficient way of being able to assess our marketing.
Yep, I agree.
Before we wrap here, I do want to talk a little bit about dealer reputation. I don't know if this is something that you guys even offer in your consulting, but I'd love to talk about it if you do.
Sure.
It's so critical to dealer business, and there's so many parts of it. It's not just about reviews. It's also about creating positive image. I'd love to know what you think about that. And if you do advise dealers, what are 1 or 2 tips that our listeners can take away from just reputation management in general?
Yeah. So we do consult around reputation, and we help dealers track it on a monthly basis and give them encouragement and ideas and campaign ideas on how they can drive more of that. And in fact, later today, I'm doing a presentation to a dealer group and teaching their sales and service teams how to leverage reviews for SEO benefit, what we touched on before. And so I think the biggest tip I could give is don't just rely on reputation.com, Podium, Digital Airstrike, whoever is doing your surveys. I mean, those are good companies, and those are good campaigns they're running where they're emailing or texting every closed RO, every closed sale or lease transaction. That's great, and continue that. But there's no substitute for a personal one-on-one ask. And I think when you do that, a number of opportunities get created. So from the sales team, asking for a review each month and saying, Joshua, thanks so much for stopping in the store, and I'm so glad we were able to connect you and your wife with this great F-150. I'm going to go grab some paperwork here real quick. I think I still have your cell phone in my phone. I'm going to text you a link. Would you mind leaving me a Google review and mentioning my name? And then don't say anything. That person, if they've had a good experience, they're going to come back with, sure, I wouldn't mind it. And you send them a link directly to your GMB short code, your short name, and add /review to the end of it. It automatically pops the stars up in front of Joshua. And if he's got a Google account, he's literally one click away from leaving that review. He leaves my name in it. Now, maybe my boss said, George, I need 2 reviews from you every month that are 5 stars with your name in it, which, that's a good thing to tie in the incentive plan. But if I'm a smart salesperson, I know that if I get my name in enough reviews and people read reviews, I'm no longer waiting on ups. I've got someone coming in asking for me by name because, they read my name 3 or 4 times in reviews, that I take good care of customers. And so, that's a big one. And if you have a customer who said, God, I don't know what I should put in a review, what should, just coach them a little bit and say, look, if you bought a car, just put the year, make, model that you bought from us. If you brought your car in for service, do that same thing, but then include whatever service. We love getting our new tires for our Mustang or our 2020 Mustang. And then mention a person's name if they dealt with them. If they could use the word best, that would be great. Service, that would be great. We love these guys. Just any kind of adjectives that Google can kind of pick up on and say, look, when people are searching for best, Ford dealer near me, I want my store to show up.
So you're saying these software companies are great, but it has to be coupled with a strategy of just embedding it into the script of the day-to-day in the dealership, and that will make a bigger impact.
Yeah, you'll get so many more. So if you just leave it up to those companies, I think you'll have trouble getting to double digits for a normal single point store. But once you inject that level, I think we have dealers that then go 10, 15 a week.
Wow.
And they're all, you hate to say it, in some ways it's review gating, right? So if Google and Yelp, they all say gates back. I don't know if I'm in that camp, but if I'm sitting across from Joshua and he's irritated and he's been here for 2 hours and we cannot get him out of the store on a cash deal, I'm not asking him for a review. I just don't want to, but I'm picking my best customers and people I know have had good experiences. And I say, is there anything else I can do to help you? George, we've loved it. We've loved you. You've been great. Awesome. Hey, can you do me a favor? That's the time, right? And I know I'm getting a 5-star from him, and so now I'm gating reviews.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. There's so much content, so much education. We really appreciate your time. Anything else you want to tell our listeners before we do our quick sign off? Show us your books, maybe. We'd love to see that.
Sure.
Those that are watching on video.
Car Dealer's Guide to Digital Marketing, Car Dealer's Guide to Google My Business. You can find them both on Amazon, or you can just Google my name and you'll find the GMBspy will pull up and the books will pull up. And we love your support and we appreciate you having us.
That's awesome. Well, we all absolutely love Amazon.com and spending way too much money on there. So please check out the books. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us today on Inside Auto Podcast. And George,
thanks, George. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. If you liked this episode, please tune in Inside Auto Podcast. We're on all mainstream podcast sites, Spotify, Deezer, Apple, iHeartMedia, you name it, InsideAutoPodcast.com. Thank you so much again, George.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, George. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Inside Auto Podcast. Check out our other episodes with top entrepreneurs and industry leaders.